Meeting of the Indiana Arts Commission Advisory Review Panel convened to review applications submitted for the Regional Initiative Grants for fiscal year 2020. I'm Sherry Stark, Commissioner from Columbus, Indiana. Today is April 29, 2019, and we are in the Indiana Humanities Building in Indianapolis. We welcome applicants who may be part of our audience today and would like to remind you that there is to be no direct contact or conversation about the evaluation and disposition of applications before, during, or after the panel meeting. Please be sure that all cell phones are silenced during the meeting today. And at this time, I would like the panelists and staff to introduce themselves, stating their name, occupation, and where they are from in the state. So we'll begin with Mary.
I'm Mary Morgan. I'm a freelance writer from Bloomington, Indiana.
I'm Patrick Tisdale. I'm a carpenter from Franklin, Indiana.
Ann Johansson, Children's Ballet, Danville, Indiana.
Stephanie Haynes, Arts Education and Accessibility Program Manager, Region 7 Grants Manager, IAC.
Deanna Polsma, the Grants Manager at the IAC from Indianapolis.
Kayla Arnold, Community Relations Specialist with the City of Carmel, Indiana.
John Simmons, I'm a freelance grant writer for various arts groups, Bloomington, Indiana.
Teresa Vasquez, Community Programs Manager at the Indianapolis Arts Center in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Thank you all. Now we'll begin the panel review, and this is how the process will work. I will announce the application we will review and ask the first reader to begin the discussion. The first reader will provide his or her assessment of the application based upon the evaluation criteria and perspective. Panelists, please note that the application does not need to be recapped since everyone has read it. Just provide your comments. After the first reader is finished, I will ask the second reader to present any new, additional, or opposing comments. We are not looking for consensus, just a full evaluation from the different perspectives each panelist brings to the table. After the second reader has finished, I'll open the discussion to the full panel to offer perspectives. Remember, in the interest of time, we are only looking for new, additional, or opposing viewpoints. If a panelist has a conflict of interest, we will ask that panelist to leave, although at this time we know of no conflict, so that's good. Finally, once the application has been reviewed by the full panel, we ask the panel to update their scores in the online system. It's common for scores to change as a result of this broader discussion. These scores that you enter then will save automatically. So, panelists, are there any questions? Then let's begin. We'll now review application Brick Street Poetry, Inc., with the project name Neighborhood Literary Art Park Programming, and our first reader is John.
Thanks. I thought it was very clear what the purpose of the grant was to be used for the Literary Art Park. And I thought the group has a lot of community partners to attract young people to work, to be part of the workshops and the presentations in the Literary Park. So all of that I thought was fairly strong. What I would like to have seen a little bit more of was the group seems to have done a lot of similar projects, so this is not completely new. But the group said when picking workshop leaders or people to develop curriculum, we'll use the same quality of presenters and that we've used in the past. I would like to have seen a little bit more about what the process was for selecting those. And it's clear how the kids would be involved in the Literary Art Park, but I wanted to see a little bit more about how the community would be involved in being brought to the park, more than just having family members come to see the presentations of their children, that kind of thing, or their relatives. So I thought the basis was very good. I would like to have seen a little bit more about the behind the scenes.
Thank you, John. Kayla?
I echo what John was saying. I also thought the goals for participation seemed well thought out and attainable.
Thank you. Other panelists, comments?
I was a little bit concerned about the notion of a literary park and how how that would be received by the community, that there would need to be some amount of education about, you know, how a literary park works. In many other countries, there are such parks and people kind of understand the dynamics, but that perhaps here there would need to be kind of some building of what that is even.
Yes, Mary?
I think it would have helped if students had been more involved in the planning process beyond just participating in the workshops. The involvement of the partners seemed to be limited to encouraging students to participate, and I think there was an opportunity there to really tap more knowledge of students in developing the program.
Thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none, I would ask you to finalize your score, update your online comments, and then sit back away from your computer so we know when you're done. Is everybody completed? All right, we will move on then to our next organization, Brownsburg Parks. The project name, Interactive Sculpture for Williams Park Entry Circle. And Teresa, please begin.
Okay, so Brownsburg Parks is a first-time applicant for this project. The interactive sculpture actually takes advantage of a misfortune that occurred, and they are trying to produce something that is going to be more in harmony with the park itself. There's been a great deal of community involvement in this planning process, research into best practices of such parks and so forth. So very strong in that regard. There's been, the project management seems very solid for this project. I guess my only question here is a little bit regarding the detail, the level of detail at which the artist, where the artist would receive the financing for this project. Will it be the full amount that's outlined for the sketches and medium installation, or not? That's my question, I guess. No.
Thank you, Teresa. All right, Patrick.
The one kind of concern that came up in my mind was just in terms of like creating a public work and the artistic quality of the work. I just wanted to hear that artists were involved in choosing the final design, that there were some sort of qualified artists at that level of choosing the final project. And that would be prior to the public voting, trying to guide the excellence of the final result to be the best possible thing. That was my only concern.
Thank you, Patrick. Other comments? Observations?
The only comment I had was in community engagement. It said they would kind of seek community feedback on the designs, that kind of thing. And in the timeline, I didn't see that. Where was that fit in? Because that's an important part of community engagement. So.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anything else? Hearing no others, I will ask you to finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let us know when you're done. Okay, all done. This will be our third one then. The Butler University, Butler Community Arts School, and the project name is String Scholars. And Mary, first reader.
This program has been around for 12 years, and I think that's reflected in the application. I really appreciated the level of detail that they provided. It was comprehensive in all categories, all criteria. I would have appreciated a little more explicit description about how past year's programs would inform the project this year. I think that would have been helpful. But overall, I felt that they were very strong community engagement efforts and inclusion efforts and community impact.
Thank you, Mary. Anne?
Yeah, they have it down to a science. It's been around for a while, so all of the support materials were there. Everything was spot on. I think I echo what Mary said. My only critique would be I wanted a little more detail on how they would use past year's projects to influence this year's. But
Thank you, Mary. Other comments or observations?
I just think one way of doing that would have been to have more video or testimonials or some kind of, since it is a performing arts proposal, to have more of that included in the proposal.
Thank you. Any other? Hearing none, if you will finalize your comments and your scores, please. We'll now do the fourth application, which is the City of Indianapolis, Office of Finance and Management. The project name is Garfield Park Art and Music Festival. And Patrick, go first, please.
Yeah, what stands out to me about this application is a musician started this music festival. It seemed rather small, and all of a sudden it's gonna grow from kind of a smallish endeavor to something much bigger. That could be a problem or it could not, but with the city behind it, I think that I would assume it would go well from there. I did like, from an inclusion standpoint, the way they were reaching out to organizations to select local artists. I like the fact that it was local musicians and not just some sort of canned cover band type thing or traveling touring bands or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. John?
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was interesting the way it started out as a very small project and grew. There's clearly an intent to make it a high quality experience for the people that attend. The things I would like to have seen would have been the goal for expanding its participation is really ambitious. I wanted to see a little bit more about how they intended to promote the program going forward to meet those goals. And it did mention the community engagement about reaching out to the African American and LGBTQ communities. I'd like to have seen a little bit more about how they were going to engage them instead.
Thank you. Other comments? All right, hearing none, I would ask you to update your comments and your scores. Then let us know when you're done. By pulling your hand off the computer. All done? Good. We're going to number 5, which is the City of Shelbyville, the Shelbyville Parks and Recreation Department. The project name is Music in the Park Series. And Kayla, please.
This application for the Music in the Park series, this would be their 5th year doing this project. So they also kind of have it down to a science in terms of what seems like sustainable growth. I also liked how they put focus on the local musicians that would be opening for their featured artists, so to help grow that community. And then I also appreciated how they their inclusion efforts in terms of reaching out to the different communities, the senior community, kids community, getting them, to be a part of that process.
Thank you, Kayla. Teresa?
I would agree with what Kayla said. I think that something that would be helpful as a feedback mechanism would be for them to have some kind of an electronic way of providing some kind of evaluation, so that if people had time afterwards, they could give some feedback.
Thank you, Teresa. Other comments or observations?
Yeah, I agree with what Teresa said. I felt like they used surveys and things like that, and those are a little bit hit and miss. I'd like to have seen a little bit more systematic way to get feedback, but other than that, I thought it was fine.
Patrick?
I noticed that the publicity and marketing budget is $13,250 and the artist fees are $6,700. So it just stood out to me that the marketing budget was about twice what they were paying the artists, and I would have liked to see, I always want to see artists get paid more.
Other comments?
I think it might help that by leveraging social media a little more. Their social media presence wasn't as robust as it probably could be.
Thank you. Mary?
And I would have liked to have seen more community engagement in the planning process. Partners seem to be mostly engaged in marketing and promotions, and I think there was an opportunity there to increase community engagement earlier on in the process.
Thank you. Any other comments? Then I would ask you to finalize your scores and update your comments, please.
My computer has a lag time.
Okay. We now will go to number 6, which is the Columbia Club Foundation, Inc. Project named The Art of the Columbia Club, History and Arts at the Center of Indiana. Anne?
So this is a new project, and the grant application was specifically for an intern, and it's a great idea. I mean, the platform the Columbia Club has and the location, and it would be a great gallery space, but I was a little confused about the focus of the project. So the scope seems kind of broad to me, while the reach in regards to the artists are a little narrow. So I didn't know what the main focus was. So is it educational? Is it just to feature Indian artists? Is it just driving foot traffic to the club, or web traffic to their virtual gallery? And then what exactly an intern would be responsible for?
Thank you, Anne. Mary?
I would echo those comments and agree with them. I was left wondering how much of this project was simply a way to open the exhibit that the Columbia Club had to the general public, which is great, but I felt there was an opportunity to do more, particularly in community engagement and planning events around the exhibits.
Thank you.
I also, it seemed like there was a lot of focus on the virtual gallery, and there's the inclusion part of it. There are a lot, they speak about serving the underserved community, but internet access is still considered a barrier in many areas. So I would have liked to seen a little bit more of how they would kind of reach out and do that.
Thank you. Other comments? Hearing none, I would ask you to update your comments and scores. Already. We will move to application number 7. This is Connor Prairie Museum, Inc. The project name is The Giving Voice Initiative. John, first reader.
Again, I thought this was a very strong proposal in terms of meeting the requirements of the grant. It was, you felt like they have it down to a science. It was clear what they were trying to do. It was clear who their community partners were. It was clear how they were going to implement the project. The work samples all showed what they'd done in the past, so they had a strong history. It was hard to find much. If you look at the grant requirements, they seem to have met almost all the grant requirements. The one question I had was, if you looked at the project timeline, it felt like some of the initial activities took place before the grant period, and I was wondering, was it clear that the monies are to be used by Connor Prairie during the grant period and not for these initial setups? That was the only question I had.
Thank you, John. Anne?
That was also my only question, was the timeline, but I really appreciated the applicant's willingness to adjust the project based on the participants' feedback. So,
Thank you. Other comments or observations? Hearing none, if you would update your comments and scores, please.
We've quickly gotten to our halfway point. Does anyone need a break this early? Okay. Feel like we're on a roll. Let us know if you need a break.
Okay. We'll move to number 8, the Fat Turtle Theater Company, and the project name is The Incubator, Fat Turtle Theater's New Works Project. Teresa.
So, Fat Turtle Theater is a first-time applicant. Their incubator project has been something that shows definite coalition between themselves and several partners. It is a very interesting focus on Indianapolis thespians, which I think is a great focus. There is so much talent here. The value, I think, builds throughout the entire community because of the partners that are engaged, and so it seems like a project that will stimulate theatrical productions throughout and stimulate the quality of theater in town. I guess one question that I have is regarding how they set their expectation for audience satisfaction. I didn't really see a basis for that in the proposal, and I would say that the project personnel and so forth, the structure seems pretty solid. The financials were not quite submitted in the way that we were anticipating. There seemed to be no income and expense statements, although a balance sheet was included. And I think there was also a discrepancy in the total for the budget. But other than that, I think it is a proposal that has a great deal of merit and can really make a strong impact on the theater community in Indianapolis.
Thank you. Kayla?
I also noticed the discrepancy in the budget. I was trying to pull that up to see what it was. But in terms of community engagement, I would have liked to have seen, they speak about future outreach efforts, but there wasn't any type of gathering of any information. So thinking of ways to capture zip codes or demographic information of folks who attended, and that would also could be helpful to gauge if the numbers are increasing, if the show's popular. And that's what I have.
Okay, thank you. Other comments, observations?
Yeah, I agree with the budget was a little confusing. It felt like the grant request wasn't included in total income. I thought the artist fees were underreported in the project expenses. So I feel that, to get a clear picture of the need for the grant, they should revise the budget so it's accurately reflects the numbers that they put on the sheets.
Thank you. Other comments, questions, observations? Hearing none, if you'd finalize your comments and scores, please. Ready? We will move to number 9, Fisher's Arts Council, and the project name, Small Business Saturday and Winter Wonderland, collectively year-end events. Mary?
So this would be the program's second year, and the application pretty clearly describes their intent to build on the previous year, which the artists selling their work, but then also adding more art demonstrations and interactive educational pieces, which I thought was a really strong trajectory. I felt like the intended audience was pretty broad, and I would have liked to seen a little bit more information about how they would attempt to provide more inclusion. They had a statement related to inclusion for artists that said the database is inclusive, and I wasn't really sure what that meant. So a little more detail in that area. I also thought the community impact section could have benefited from a little bit more detail. The responses were pretty brief, and I was kind of left wondering, wanting to know a little bit more about how they intended to, how this project would impact the community.
Thank you, Mary. John?
Yeah, I agree with those statements. I thought it was clear what they were trying to do. I thought the video support, that the videos they submitted as part of the supporting documentation were strong because it showed what it looked like and how the community was engaged. They did mention, as you said, that they wanted to have more variety and more artists in this year's Winter Wonderland, but I didn't see how they were going to do that. They didn't spell out how they were going to get more variety and more artists.
Thank you, John. Other comments? Hearing none, I'd ask you to update your comments and your scoring, please. We will now move to applicant number 10, Franklin Heritage, Inc., and the project name is Missoula Children's Theater. Patrick.
So Franklin Heritage owns the Art Craft Theater in Franklin, which I'm aware of. It's an old theater and they show movies, but they have this Missoula Children's Theater come from, I believe it's Montana, and they send a couple people I'm sorry, to do this theater project, which seems impressive to me. They do it in 1 week with just a couple of actors and do sets, so it's ambitious. They've done this project for 5 years. Sorry, trying to scroll. They're I'm not sure. The engagement seems good. They seem to be reaching out to the community to find, it seems like they want to find more kids to participate. I think I saw 40 kids were part of the production last year, and 60 was the goal. So that seems like really impactful, especially to a kid.
All right, thank you, Patrick. Teresa?
I I think that this project does a good effort of trying to bring a resource to a community that does not exist within the community, so I think that's laudable. What wasn't as clear to me was the particular merit of the Missoula Theater Company with regard to kind of theater in general. Is there merit simply that they are kind of a portable theater that have this way of working with the community in a week's time? Was that the main draw? It was not clear to me from the materials. Also, I was wondering, they did project this number of 60, but I was wondering what would happen like if they had 70 instead. Would there be some kind of a triage of the students, and then those other students who didn't make it, would they simply not take part in the camp, or would they have some other kind of role? So that would have been helpful information. Also, in terms of the budget, there was no amount that was entered in the submitted budget as far as what they were asking of the commission. On the form, that information was there, but not on the budget itself. So there was a little bit of clarity that could have taken place there.
Thank you, Teresa. Other comments?
I thought, they're really dependent on the Missoula Theater Company to bring their things or that outside theater company to bring their presentation to the theater. So I thought the mission statement was mostly about the theater itself and not about the project. I was also confused about the project start and end dates. If I read it right, it starts on June 10th and ends June 15th of 2019. That's before the grant period. So I was curious as to how that affects their eligibility. That was the thing that really stood out. It was they're dependent on the group that's bringing the presentations in. That's when they could schedule. That falls outside of the grant period. So,
Thank you. Other comments? Hearing none, please update your comments and your scores. Ready? We will move now to number 11, which is the Greenwood Parks and Recreation, City of Greenwood, project name Art on the Trail. Kayla.
The City of Greenwood's Art on the Trail has been taking place since 2014 and is provides rotating sculptures public art every 2 years. The one thing I really liked about this was it was a positive way to educate members of the public. There are no barriers for people. It's free and accessible, ADA, all of that good stuff. The one thing I would have liked to have seen is that when they do the call out for artists, it'd be great if preference was given to local artists. It looked like it was kind of a nationwide call out, and they did speak to that they've received applications from several other states. But given that it would be potentially a grant from IAC, it would be great if it could stay within the state. The other comment I had was that it looked like they were trying to be inclusive in the community and to get that community engagement from the members that sit on the panel to choose the artwork. They do pull in, it looks like artists, landscape architect, so they had really, they thought it out.
Okay, thank you. Mary?
I agree with your comments. I appreciated the supporting materials that showed what they had done in the past. I thought that was helpful. And perhaps other panelists can help me on the timeline. and I'm trying to pull it up, I wasn't clear when there was like a mention of the artists getting 70% of their payment, and then I wondered where the other 30% came in. Right, under the project activities timeline, it says upon installation, artists will receive 70% of their $3,000 payment. But I just wasn't clear what the remainder, when that would come, and that could be a helpful thing to know.
John?
I agree with some of the comments that have been made, that the grant specifically states in their response that the public is not being involved in the direct selection process. So I would like, but they are collecting information through online and public forums. What are they doing with that information? How does that get to the jury panel, that kind of thing? I thought the supporting documentation, the video in particular, was really good at showing what they had, what they'd done, and why it was important to the community. But I would like to have seen how the community is involved in the selection process.
Other comments? Hearing none, if you'd finalize your scores and update your online comments, please.
I will add that having the artist be local is not part of our criteria for this grant, so.
All right, we ready? We will move to number 12, the Hindu Temple of Indiana, project name Navrang, and Anne.
This project's in its second year with the Hindu temple, and really exciting way to kind of showcase this community. And as a dance person, I was like, I kind of want to come. So the timeline's great. The financials are there. I was just wanting a little more information about sort of the purpose of the event. It's a fundraiser for the Hindu temple. So how many people are they hoping will attend, and what the impact on the temple will be? And then also around inclusion, they're going to use their youth and people who are part of the temple to help promote it, but bringing in the community and showcasing this, and how specifically that those plans are going to happen. I think part of the promotion might be the dance schools that are involved, and then getting people interested in those and getting more information about the dance schools to the community, that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. Kayla?
I also thought it was very well thought out, and there was some obvious time put into it. The one thing that I would have liked to have seen in terms of the dance is that could there be an interactive component, to get participants to, kind of go on that dance school to learn how to do something, do one of the dances. And then I wasn't quite sure the evaluation methods listed. I didn't really see a lot there. So just how to know, how you created that awareness and if it was successful or not. But I did think that in the beginning, the artistic quality, obvious time went into the selection of the artists to represent the project.
Thank you. Other comments? John?
Yeah, I agree with the statement that you could tell from the supporting materials and the videos that a lot of time was spent in developing the quality. The only thing I thought that was missing is that I didn't see much about the tools that they were going to use to measure the impact.
Okay, thank you. Other comments, observations?
I would just say that, I agree with what's been said so far, but I also think that having so many diverse partners being a part of this festival, that some kind of ongoing involvement in the planning and the execution and the debrief, particularly on how they could improve, would be a way to show more effective community engagement.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, observations, thoughts? All right, then I would ask you to finalize your scores and update your online comments. All right, we will move to number 13, the Improbable Fiction Theater Company, and the project name is Improbable Fiction Theater Company Presents Original Work and Pooh Corner. First reader's John.
Okay, I thought it was a good application. Supporting documentation was good. I would like to have seen a little bit more about how the past history of the theater company had formed, what they were doing now, where their actors, directors, and set builders come from, and how they're chosen. I thought they'd set up a really good narrative about what they were trying to do, and then I wanted to see a little bit more about how they were selecting the people who did it. Let's see. Yeah, I'd like to have seen, it felt like one of the things in the grant requirements are that they talk about bringing the community into the process while you're planning it. It felt like the plays were selected and then presented to the community, so I'd like to have seen a little bit more about how they're involved in the selection process. If they're not involved for this year, how do you intend to do it going forward? I would like to have seen that. And how they intend to bring underserved audiences, what they consider to be their underserved audiences, and how they intend to bring them in to the process as well. I would like to see more of that.
Thank you, John. Patrick?
I do agree with John. The way I kind of framed it in my mind was I didn't clearly see the difference between community engagement and just an entertainment event. And so if that could have been spelled out a little more clearly in the narrative, that would have helped me to see it, the engagement piece a little bit clearer. The other detail that I picked up on was because I'm not as familiar with production schedules, I would have liked to seen a little bit more about the timeline, a little bit more detail regarding that.
Thank you, Patrick. Other comments? Hearing none, if you would finalize your scores and update your online comments, please. Well, here we go, home stretch, final one. Number 14, the Indiana Historical Society, project name Museum Theater Actors in You Are There, Madam Walker, Empowering Women. And we will start with Teresa.
So IHS has been doing this You Are Here series for 13 years, and the fact that they are leveraging the resources, the natural resources of the IHS through these performances just really brings to life the story that they are proposing doing as Madam C.J. Walker's story. And they're not only telling her story, but also of many of the individuals that she would have come into contact with. There's ample evidence that IHS will be able to make this as interactive and as rich of an experience for visitors as some of their other You Are Here series items. And so as far as community engagement goes, I think they do partner with many possible organizations. There's some discussion about the 100th anniversary of female suffrage, and while this is something that Madam C.J. Walker herself advocated for, she did not live to see, but it would be interesting to understand a little bit more how they would incorporate that element. Let's see. I think this will have a very definite impact on theatrical roles for African Americans in town, and there is a very robust kind of timeline for education of the actors around the roles, and very very thorough kind of formation for the actors. So budgets and timelines and everything looked very good, and this project has a lot of promise.
Thank you. Anne?
Yeah, I thought their strongest, all of it is strong, but the strongest was the community engagement and how they leverage their partnerships with theaters in the city and actors, and it's been really fun to see the progression of this particular program, and I think that they're on a really great track.
Thank you. Other comments? Hearing none, I would ask you to finalize your scores and update your online comments. This concludes the fiscal year 2020 Regional Initiative Grant Panel for today. Thank you so much to panelists and to our audience.